My pregnant fiancé announced, "These twins aren't yours, they're Chris's. I'm going back to him where I belong." I wished her luck and made a few calls. 2 weeks later, she was sobbing on my doorstep. Well, let me break down exactly how this whole mess started. Picture this. It's a Tuesday evening in October, and I'm sitting in what was supposed to be our nursery, watching my wife Brittany fold tiny baby clothes while her belly curved out like she was smuggling a basketball. 6 months pregnant with twins, and she had this glow that everyone kept telling me pregnant women get. I was 32, working as an automotive service manager here in San Antonio, and honestly thought I had life figured out. We'd been married for 3 years, together for 5, and I was already mentally preparing for sleepless nights and diaper duty. The wedding gifts were still trickling in even though we'd gotten married last spring, and we had our venue booked for a baby shower that was supposed to happen in 2 weeks. I remember watching her hands shake slightly as she folded this tiny yellow onesie, and something in my gut just knew. You know that feeling when your car makes a weird noise and you pretend it's nothing, but deep down you know you're about to get hit with a massive repair bill? That's exactly what this felt like, except instead of engine trouble, I was about to get my entire world dismantled. She set down the onesie and turned to face me with this expression I'd never seen before, like she was about to confess to murder. "Marcus, we need to talk," she said, and those 4 words hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. I set down the crib instructions I'd been pretending to read and gave her my full attention. "These babies," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper, "they're not yours." The words hung in the air like exhaust fumes in a closed garage. For a moment, I thought maybe I'd misheard her, maybe she said something else entirely, but the look on her face confirmed my worst fears. "They're Chris's," she added, referring to her ex-boyfriend who she'd dated before me, some construction foreman with commitment issues that I'd honestly never given much thought to. "And I'm leaving. I'm going to build a real family with him." The rational part of my brain wanted to scream, to throw something, to demand answers about when this happened and how long she'd been lying to me. But instead, something strange happened. A weird calm washed over me, like when you finally accept that your engine is blown and there's no point in getting angry at the car. I looked at her sitting there in our nursery, surrounded by all these baby things we'd picked out together, and I felt something inside me just disconnect. "I hope it works out for you," I said, and I meant it. Not in a sarcastic way, not in a bitter way, but in that same tone you'd use to wish someone well when they're moving to another state. She blinked at me like I'd just spoken in a foreign language. "That's it? That's all you're going to say?" she asked, and I could hear the confusion in her voice. Maybe she expected me to beg, to fight for her, to promise I'd raise Chris's kids as my own. But here's the thing about betrayal, sometimes it's so complete, so thorough, that it actually sets you free. "What else is there to say, Brittany? You've made your choice." I stood up from the rocking chair we'd bought for me to use during those late-night feedings that would never happen. "I'll start making arrangements." And that's exactly what I did. The next morning, I called in a personal day and began the methodical process of untangling our lives. I started with the wedding gifts, boxing up everything with gift receipts and driving them back to the stores where they'd been purchased. The stand mixer went back to Williams-Sonoma, the crystal went back to Macy's, the silverware set returned to Bed Bath & Beyond. Each return felt like removing another thread from a tapestry that was never as beautiful as I thought it was. Then I contacted our wedding venue about the baby shower reservation and discovered I could get most of our deposit back if I canceled within 30 days. $6,800 back in my account, money that would have gone towards celebrating children that weren't even mine. I removed her from my auto insurance policy, which immediately dropped my monthly payment by $140. The joint savings account got closed, and I transferred my half into a new account she couldn't access. I updated the beneficiary on my 401k from Brittany Rivera, spouse, to Marcus Rivera Sr., father. Each call, each form, each signature felt like taking back a piece of myself that I'd freely given to someone who never deserved it. She moved out that weekend while I was at work, which was probably best for both of us. No dramatic confrontations, no tearful goodbyes, just empty closet space and a bathroom counter suddenly free of her endless collection of skincare products. 2 weeks later, I was settling into my new routine of coming home to a quiet house when I heard her key in the front door. I'd forgotten to change the locks, which seemed like an oversight until I saw her standing in my living room with mascara streaked down her cheeks and her belly even bigger than before. "Marcus, I made a terrible mistake," she sobbed, and for a moment I felt that old instinct to comfort her, to make everything okay. But then she continued, "Chris is gone. He hasn't answered my calls in 4 days, and when I went to his apartment, his roommate said he just packed up and left. His construction crew fired him for missing too much work, and now I don't know where he is or what I'm supposed to do." I set down my dinner and really looked at her, this woman who'd been my wife, who'd carried what I thought were our children, who'd chosen someone else over the life we'd built together. The tears were real, the desperation was genuine, but it wasn't my problem anymore. Let me tell you exactly how the family pressure campaign started. The morning after Brittany's tearful visit, my phone rang at 6 a.m. with a number I didn't recognize. Marcus Rivera? The voice was sharp, accusatory, like I'd personally wronged this person. "This is Samantha Walsh, Brittany's sister." I knew Samantha, 24 years old, still in college, still living in that bubble where everything can be fixed with good intentions and fairy tale thinking. "I cannot believe you would abandon a pregnant woman like this. Do you have any idea what you've done to her?" The audacity hit me like a wrench to the face. Here was someone calling me at dawn to lecture me about abandoning the woman who'd abandoned me first, who'd been carrying another man's children while I planned our future. "Samantha, I think you might be confused about what actually happened here," I said, keeping my voice level despite wanting to hang up. "She left me, remember? For the father of those babies." But Samantha wasn't interested in facts. "That doesn't matter now. She needs you, Marcus. Those babies need a father figure, and you're being selfish by turning your back on them." Selfish. That word stuck with me all day while I worked on a transmission rebuild, because it takes a special kind of mental gymnastics to call someone selfish for refusing to raise another man's children after being betrayed. That evening, I got a text from Brittany's mother Patricia, a school secretary who'd always treated me like I wasn't quite good enough for her daughter but tolerated me because I had a steady job and treated Brittany well. "We need to talk. I'm coming over after work tomorrow." It wasn't a request. Patricia Walsh showed up at my door the next evening like she owned the place, marching past me into my living room without an invitation. She was 53, had that authoritative school administrator energy that made grown men feel like they were back in the principal's office getting scolded for something they didn't do. "Sit down, Marcus. We're going to discuss how you're going to step up like a real man and take responsibility for this situation." I remained standing, crossing my arms. "Patricia, with all due respect, your daughter chose to leave me for the actual father of those children. I'm not responsible for cleaning up the mess when that didn't work out." Her face turned red, and I could see where Brittany got her dramatic flair. "Those babies didn't ask to be born into this situation. You have the power to give them a stable home, a father who won't abandon them, and you're choosing your pride over innocent children." The manipulation was so transparent it was almost insulting. My pride? Your daughter was pregnant with another man's children while married to me, Patricia. This isn't about pride, it's about reality. But she wasn't done. Chris is gone, Marcus. Brittany made a mistake, but that doesn't mean you should punish innocent babies for it. You took vows for better or worse. I had to laugh at that one. The vows went both ways, and Brittany broke hers when she decided to have an affair and lie to me for months. Meanwhile, my friend Tony Castellanos, who works as an insurance adjuster and has a talent for finding information about people, had been doing some digging on Chris Phillips after I mentioned the situation. Tony called me that Friday with details that painted an even clearer picture of Brittany's poor judgment. "Dude, your ex-wife really knows how to pick them," Tony said over beers after work. Chris Phillips owes 15 grand in gambling debts to some pretty serious people. Word is he took that construction job in Houston as a way to disappear from his creditors here in San Antonio. The guy hasn't contacted Brittany since she moved in with him, and from what I'm hearing, he never intended to stick around and play house. $15,000 in gambling debts. Suddenly Chris's disappearing act made perfect sense, and I felt a strange mix of vindication and pity for Brittany. She'd thrown away our marriage for a man who was using her as a temporary hideout from his own problems. During this time, Brittany kept trying to access our old joint account, which obviously didn't work since I'd closed it weeks earlier. She sent me text after text, each one more desperate than the last. "Marcus, please just talk to me. We can figure this out together." Then, "I know I messed up, but we have history. That has to count for something." And finally, "I'm scared and alone and I don't know what to do. Please don't abandon me like this." Each message felt like emotional manipulation disguised as vulnerability, and I found myself taking screenshots and forwarding them to Tony, who'd started documenting everything in case I needed legal protection later. The pressure from her family intensified throughout the week. Her father David, a postal worker who'd always been the quiet one, called me once, his voice tired. "Marcus, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but Patricia's been crying every night about this situation. Maybe you could just consider helping somehow?" Even he couldn't fully commit to asking me to take back his pregnant daughter who'd cheated on me, which told me everything I needed to know about what they really thought of Brittany's choices. But the most telling moment came when Samantha showed up at my auto shop during lunch, 8 months pregnant now and clearly struggling. "Marcus, look at her. She's 7 months pregnant with twins and working on her feet all day at the dental office. Her blood pressure is high, she's exhausted, and she's staying in some crappy extended stay motel because she can't afford anything else. How can you just watch this happen?" I set down my sandwich and looked at this young woman who still believed that good intentions could rewrite history. "Samantha, I'm not watching anything happen. Your sister made a series of choices that led her to this situation. Chris Phillips is responsible for those children and for taking care of their mother. The fact that he's a deadbeat who ran away doesn't transfer that responsibility to me." The desperation in Samantha's eyes was real, but so was my resolve. The confrontation I'd been dreading finally happened on a Thursday afternoon in November. I was under the hood of a 2018 Camaro, diagnosing what sounded like a timing chain issue, when I heard familiar footsteps on the concrete floor of my auto shop. I didn't need to look up to know it was Brittany. I recognized the way she walked, that slightly off-balance gait she developed as her pregnancy progressed. But when I finally did straighten up and turn around, the sight of her made me do a double take. 8 months pregnant now, she looked like she'd aged 5 years in the past few weeks. Her usually perfect blonde hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, her work scrubs were wrinkled like she'd slept in them, and there were dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't hide. More than that, she had this desperate energy radiating off her like heat from an overworked engine. "Marcus, we need to talk. Please. Just 5 minutes." Her voice cracked on the word please, and I could see my coworkers pretending not to stare while they worked on their own projects. This was exactly the kind of drama I'd been trying to avoid, but she'd brought it right to my workplace. "Brittany, you can't just show up at my job like this. We've already said everything we need to say to each other." I wiped my hands on a shop rag, trying to keep my voice professional and calm. But she stepped closer, and I could see tears starting to form in her eyes. "Chris took everything, Marcus. Everything. He didn't just disappear, he cleaned out my savings account, maxed out my credit cards, and left me with nothing. I found out yesterday that he'd been using my information to take cash advances for weeks before he vanished." The words hit me like a punch to the gut, not because I felt sorry for her, but because the sheer stupidity of the situation was staggering. She'd given this man access to her finances while pregnant with his children, and he'd robbed her blind before running away from his responsibilities. "I'm staying at the Motel 6 on the interstate," she continued, her voice getting smaller with each word. "I can barely afford that and my credit cards are almost maxed out. The dental office cut my hours because some patients complained that I was too emotional during their cleanings, and Dr. Peterson said my personal issues were affecting the workplace atmosphere." I set down the shop rag and really looked at her, this woman who'd once been my wife, who'd shared my bed and my dreams and my bank account. The Brittany I'd married would never have found herself in a roadside motel, pregnant and broke. But that Brittany had also never existed. She'd been a carefully constructed facade hiding someone who made catastrophically poor decisions. "My blood pressure's been high," she added, placing a hand on her swollen belly. "The doctor said I need to reduce stress and get more rest, But how can I rest when I don't know where I'm going to be sleeping next week? My family keeps telling me this is all my fault for making bad choices, but they won't actually help. Mom lectures me about responsibility while Dad just shakes his head and goes back to watching TV. Samantha says I've brought this on myself, and that I should have known better than to trust Chris. The irony was almost beautiful in its completeness. The same family members who'd been calling me selfish for not taking her back were now treating her like a cautionary tale when she actually needed help. Marcus, I know I screwed up. I know I hurt you in ways I can't even begin to make up for. But I'm desperate here. I don't have anyone else to turn to. She was crying openly now, and part of me, the part that had loved her for 5 years, wanted to reach out and comfort her. But that impulse died when I remembered all those months she'd been lying to me, all those times she'd let me talk about our future while knowing she was carrying another man's children. Brittany, I'm sorry you're in this situation. I really am. But Chris Phillips is the father of those babies, which makes him responsible for taking care of you and them. The fact that he turned out to be exactly the kind of man everyone except you could see he was doesn't change that. Her face crumpled, and for a moment she looked like a lost child rather than a grown woman who'd made adult decisions. He's gone, Marcus. His phone's disconnected, his apartment's empty, and even his coworkers don't know where he went. I hired a private investigator with the last of my savings, and all she could tell me was that he probably left Texas entirely. I'm never going to see him again, and these babies are never going to know their father. The weight of her situation hung between us like exhaust fumes, thick and suffocating. I could see my coworkers trying to look busy while obviously listening to every word, and I knew this conversation would be the topic of break room discussion for weeks. But none of that mattered as much as the choice I was facing right now. She was standing there, 8 months pregnant with twins, broke and scared and asking me to save her from the consequences of her own decisions. The old Marcus, the one who'd loved her unconditionally, might have said yes. But that Marcus had died the night she told me those babies weren't mine. I can't help you, Brittany. Those children have a father, and it's not me. The fact that he's a coward who ran away doesn't make them my responsibility. She stared at me for a long moment, like she was seeing me clearly for the first time in years. Then she nodded once, wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, and walked out of my shop without another word. Fast forward 9 months, and let me paint you a picture of how everything turned out. I was pushing my cart through the cereal aisle at H-E-B on a Saturday morning when I heard a sound that stopped me in my tracks, the distinctive wailing of twin babies echoing through the store like a car alarm you can't shut off. Something about those cries made me look up from the granola bars I'd been comparing, and that's when I saw her. Brittany stood 3 aisles down in the baby food section, looking like she'd been through a blender set on high speed. Her hair was thrown back in what used to be called a mom bun but looked more like she'd given up halfway through getting ready. She wore sweatpants and a stained t-shirt that hung off her frame like she'd lost weight she couldn't afford to lose. The double stroller in front of her contained 2 red-faced infants who were competing to see who could scream louder, while she frantically dug through a coupon organizer with shaking hands. I watched her count out coupons like they were $100 bills, checking each one twice before adding a jar of baby food to her cart. The sight should have made me feel something, pity, vindication, maybe even a twisted sense of satisfaction. Instead, I felt nothing but a mild curiosity, like watching a nature documentary about animals I'd never encounter in real life. She was a stranger now, someone whose problems belonged to a different world than mine. I turned my cart around and finished my shopping in a different section of the store, picking up the organic pasta Amanda had asked me to get and the good coffee we both loved. 9 months had changed everything for both of us, just in opposite directions. Later that week, my coworker Rick pulled me aside during our lunch break with that look people get when they're about to deliver unwanted news. Hey man, I got a weird phone call yesterday. Some lady named Patricia Walsh said she knows you. She wanted me to pass along a message. I set down my sandwich and braced myself, because I knew exactly what was coming. Patricia Walsh had apparently tracked down someone from my workplace and decided to make one final play for her daughter's welfare. She said to tell you that Brittany's really struggling, and that you could still be the father those babies need. Said something about it not being too late to do the right thing. Rick looked uncomfortable delivering the message, like he knew he was stepping into something messy but couldn't avoid it. The audacity was almost impressive. After 9 months of silence, Patricia was still trying to manipulate me into cleaning up her daughter's mess. Rick, I appreciate you passing that along, but here's the thing. Those babies already have a father. His name is Chris Phillips, and he made them his responsibility the moment Brittany chose him over our marriage. The fact that he's not living up to that responsibility doesn't transfer it to me. Rick nodded and never brought it up again, which told me he understood the situation better than Brittany's family ever would. Through Tony's information network, I'd learned bits and pieces about how things had gone for Brittany after the twins were born. She'd moved back into her childhood bedroom at her parents' house, which couldn't have been easy for a woman who'd gotten used to being married and independent. Her parents provided childcare when she worked her part-time shifts at the dental office, but apparently came with a constant stream of criticism about her life choices. Chris had been located exactly twice in 9 months, both times when the state garnished wages from temporary construction jobs he'd picked up in different states. The child support payments were sporadic at best, and barely covered diapers when they came at all. According to Tony's sources, Brittany was dealing with postpartum depression on top of everything else, which made sense given that she was essentially a single mother living under her parents' roof while they reminded her daily about how she'd brought this situation on herself. Meanwhile, my life had taken a completely different trajectory. I'd met Amanda Foster 6 months earlier when she brought her elderly dog into the emergency vet clinic next to my auto shop. She was a veterinary technician, 31 years old, with this calm confidence that came from dealing with crisis situations at work every day. What started as casual conversation while I waited for a tow truck had turned into coffee dates, then dinner dates, then lazy Sunday mornings reading the paper together while she made better pancakes than I'd ever tasted. Amanda knew my whole story. I told her everything on our 3rd date because I believed in being upfront about baggage. Her response had been perfect. So you're saying you're a man who honors his commitments and expects the same from others? That sounds like a feature, not a bug. She appreciated my emotional maturity, my loyalty, and the fact that I'd handled the entire situation without becoming bitter or vindictive. You could have made Brittany's life hell, she told me one evening as we sat on my back porch watching the sunset. You could have contested the divorce, fought over assets, made everything as difficult as possible. Instead, you just stepped back and let her live with her choices. That takes a special kind of strength. That conversation made me realize something important about what had happened over the past year and a half. Everyone kept talking about revenge, about getting back at Brittany for what she'd done to me. Her family thought I was being vindictive by not taking her back. Some of my friends thought I should have been more aggressive about making her suffer consequences. But the truth was simpler than any of that. I hadn't sought revenge against Brittany because I didn't need to. She'd chosen Chris Phillips over our marriage, over our life together, over everything we'd built. The most respectful thing I could do was honor that choice and allow her to live with whatever came from it. Her current situation wasn't the result of my cruelty or vindictiveness. It was the natural consequence of choosing someone who wasn't ready for the responsibility of a family. Chris had shown her exactly who he was, and I'd simply refused to rescue her from that reality. As I sat there with Amanda, watching the sky turn orange and pink while she told me about a particularly challenging surgery they'd performed that day, I realized that the best revenge really had been no revenge at all. I'd simply moved forward with my life, found someone who valued the same things I did, and built something new and better than what I'd lost.